So let's take a look at our next writing lesson. So we're going to go down to we're going to start at lesson 7, using transitions. So transition words and phrases are a really great way to help us move our story along. They also help us to vary our sentence structure so that our sentences aren't all the same. So when we choose a transition to start a sentence, we have to make sure that we choose one that makes sense and that fits the style and structure of the sentences. And sentences should always flow very nicely from one to the next. So there's a bunch of examples, plus that banish boring words that you saw for last week's lessons has some really great transition words in it as well. For example, some things you can use for kind of a beginning part of a story. You could say things like first, it all started, it began, first of all. Middle, you could say things like next, following, later on, meanwhile, next thing I knew. And at the end, things like at last, as you can see, overall, in the end. So you have a ton of options. Our next lesson, so lesson 8, is on dialogue. So dialogue just means like people talking, so things that people are saying. And dialogue is a really great way that we can add detail and description to our story. It helps to show the actions, character traits, character interactions. So there's a couple of examples below. And what I want you to do is in each of the 5 boxes below, write some possible quotes that you might use, some possible dialogue that you might use in your personal narrative. So for example, "Let's get going," called my sister from downstairs. My brother replied, "That sounds like a great idea." "Wait for me," my sister cried, "or I'm going to tell Mom." And I'll also note that our grammar lesson is on using quotation marks and commas within quotation marks correctly. So we'll touch more on this during grammar. So for example, since I'm writing about when we took my niece to Disneyland for the first time, an example of dialogue that I might use is, "Look at the pretty fireworks," exclamation point, "said Lila." And I'm going to fill in all 5 of these boxes. We're going to fill in all 5 of them with possible quotes. So try to make sure that they vary a little bit so you can have your dialogue tag that like called or said or someone said at the end. You can have it in the beginning or you can even have it in the middle. So try to vary, So try to vary it if you can. So it's not all exactly the same because it might sound a little bit repetitive or robotic if we just say, "Let's get going," my sister said. "Okay," my brother said. "Let's go here," my sister said. So try to vary where you're putting those dialogue tags. And like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about how to write how to write the quotations during our grammar lesson this week.